The Dallas Cowboys finished the 2023 season with a 12-5 record and made the playoffs for the third straight year. They finished top 5 in points per game for the third straight year, including leading the league in points for the second time in 3 seasons. It was a very successful regular season for the Cowboys, but as we know, their season came to an end in a very ugly loss to the Green Bay Packers. As everyone knows, the Cowboys haven't went to the NFC Championship game since the middle of the 90s, and we are now entering year 9 of the Dak Prescott era. And since Dak has taken over as quarterback, he has a postseason record of just 2-5. The Cowboys team preview is going to be unlike a lot of other team previews because this isn't a team that struggles a whole lot. And in fact, you may be surprised to find out that there's only one team to have 12 wins in each of the last 3 regular seasons, and it's not Kansas City, it's Dallas. But despite going a combined 36-15 over the last 3 regular seasons, they're 1-3 in the playoffs, with their lone playoff win coming over a team that actually had a losing record in the regular season, which of course was the 2022 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And here we are in the present day where the Dallas Cowboys are in a brutal situation, because the fan base, and understandably so, is fed up. And the loss to Green Bay last year took a lot out of the fan base. So the big question entering 2024 for Dallas, who lost a lot of players in free agency by the way, is how far will they go? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down who the Cowboys lost in free agency, and it starts with former pass rusher Dorance Armstrong. Dorance is a very solid player and has been for the past few years, and he actually has 21 sacks over the past 3 seasons. He had 8.5 sacks in 2022 and 7.5 in 2023, and the loss is going to be a lot bigger than people realize. Not just because he left, but because the player who was going to replace him in 2022 second-round pick Sam Williams unfortunately tore his ACL in camp and is already done for the year. Drafting Sam Williams ahead of time, knowing the plan was for him to eventually take over, was a great decision and great thought process, and it's always great to have a plan in place, but losing Dorance, and especially to a division rival, is going to hurt that much more. Now, obviously Dallas had no way of knowing Sam was going to get hurt before the 2024 season even began, and we of course wish Sam the best in his recovery and hope he kills it in 2025 in what will be a contract year for him. But the butterfly effect of that is they're going to have rookie Marshawn Kneeland step up and be the third guy to get after the quarterback behind Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, of course. And for what it's worth, I don't blame Dallas for letting Dorance walk in free agency at all, as they had a plan in place, and unfortunately an injury put a fork in the road, which is out of everyone's control. They also lost center Tyler Biadasz to the Commanders, and while losing both Armstrong and Biadasz are not franchise-changing losses, they're not easily replaceable. I mean, Dallas spent a second-round pick on Sam Williams to eventually replace Armstrong, and they are entering the year with Brock Huffman slated to be the starting center. Brock is a true wild card at center, and while Biadasz isn't Jason Kelce by any means, replacing a player of his caliber is a lot more difficult than you think. And a lot of the time when you talk ball with your buddies or people at the bar or work or wherever, quarterbacks are going to be one of the first things to come up. And there's a reason quarterbacks don't get traded, but centers don't either. And having anywhere from an average center to an elite center is critical, and something that I think from a fan's perspective at times can be taken for granted. Brock is a former undrafted free agent from Virginia Tech, and I am eager to see how he does this year, but I would be surprised if he plays at the level Biadasz did last year. And that wasn't the only loss along the offensive line in free agency, as Tyron Smith, the longtime Cowboy, signed with the Jets, and of course running back Tony Pollard is now a Titan. Replacing those guys isn't going to be easy, and I know Tyron Smith hasn't played more than 14 games in a season since all the way back in 2015, but he did play 13 games last year, so they are in fact replacing another starter from last year to this year. We'll discuss the offense a lot more in depth later in the video, but letting Tony Pollard walk to bring back a 29-year-old Ezekiel Elliott, and more so the fact that they brought back Zeke and have the running back room they currently do, is certainly a choice. They also lost defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who is now the head coach of the Commanders, and brought in former Cowboys defensive coordinator and former Vikings head coach Mike Zimmer to replace Quinn for the 2024 season. Now, pertaining to the Cowboys defense in 2024, whatever you think of this team, I love their defense. And one part of the Cowboys defense that I don't think is getting talked about enough nationally is the return of Trayvon Diggs. The Cowboys lost Trayvon Diggs for the year in 2023 in the middle of a practice leading up to week 3, and just like that, he was done. Losing a player like that is obviously tough, and the silver lining within this was having DaRon Bland step up and have 5 pick sixes over the course of the 2023 season. So when you have 2 ball-hawking corners like this, combined with a pass rush that, again, will be very good even with the loss of Dorrance Armstrong in free agency, and now Sam Williams to a torn ACL, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited to watch this defense this year. Micah Parsons is also a one-of-one player defensively, and he had over 100 pressures for the first time last year, which was preceded by a 90 pressure season in 2022. It is not an exaggeration to say Micah makes everyone's jobs easier on defense because of how much opposing offenses have to account for him. Hell, there was a game back in 2022 against the Vikings where Micah beat Christian Darrisaw, who is a very good left tackle and just signed a $100+ million extension, and had a strip sack on the 3rd play of the game, and the Cowboys would go on to win and absolutely dismantle Minnesota with a score of 40-3. The tone was set early in that game by Micah Parsons. And Micah had 13 games last year where he had 5 pressures or more, which from one player is downright insane. And when you have a player who can get after the quarterback at the rate Micah does, corners like Trayvon Diggs and DaRon Bland are in a position to be able to attack the football as corners because the opposing quarterback is going to have less time to throw the football, and the opposing quarterback knows this before the ball is even snapped. Now, one thing I do worry about with the Cowboys defense in 2024 is something that happened in a few of their losses last year. Dallas's defense naturally thrives on being able to get after the quarterback and to be able to put Micah, D-Law, Osa Odigizua, and the gang in great situations for them to succeed. And the Cowboys won 9 games by double digits in 2023, and there was a reason for that. They would get up on teams quick and not let up, and when they couldn't get up quick and pounce on a team's throat, it was 50-50. And they couldn't pounce on the Packers in the wildcard round like they did to teams throughout the year, and that's what worries me with Dallas in 2024. And another game that represented this to a T was the Bills game in Week 15. Buffalo had 3 drives in the first half alone that were double-digit play drives that ended in touchdowns, all of which were 75 or more yards. Not surprisingly, Buffalo had over 35 minutes time of possession in this game and ran the ball 49 times as a team. Josh Allen only threw for 94 yards, but the Bills won by 21 points. And for as much as I love certain players on this defense, I can't help but wonder how they're going to play in a game where they don't match up well against. 3 games in their first 7, which are games against Baltimore, Detroit, and San Francisco, are games I'm going to be paying particular attention to see how this team plays them, who are all elite at running the football. And side note, I can't wait for the Detroit game, especially with how that game ended last year between these teams. One thing I do want to be clear with the 2024 Cowboys is I think they're going to be a very good team, and I think you would be ignorant to just say, it's the Cowboys, they're not a serious threat. Now, do I think they're going to go all the way and win the Super Bowl and have it be their year? No, because I think they are a very flawed team offensively, which we'll get into, but I worry about how the Cowboys play in big games more than I worry about with other teams. Whether it was a 32-point loss to San Francisco last year, or a 21-point loss to Buffalo later in the year, or even a 16-point loss to Green Bay, which was honestly a gift from Green Bay based on how that game was played, because we all know it was a lot uglier than a 16-point loss, which is already pretty bad as it is. I worry about how the Dallas Cowboys will play when it comes hell or high water. Now, for the 2024 Cowboys offense, it's going to start with quarterback Dak Prescott. And to be completely honest, I have zero concerns with Dak entering this year. Now, when we get to the team ceiling and how this team's going to do in the playoffs, we'll have that discussion then. But Dak is one of 2 quarterbacks over the last 3 years to throw for 36 or more touchdowns. The other is, you probably guessed it, Patrick Mahomes. Pertaining to this year and the regular season and the 17 games that are in front of them, I don't have any concerns. Honestly, I wouldn't have been upset last year if Dak won the MVP. He was a really, really good player all year long, outside of a game or two that was unfortunately for Cowboys fans and Dak fans on national TV, and we can all probably think of the one that we're referring to, in the regular season that is. Now, I do have some concerns with the run game. I don't think Zeke Elliott is going to be the player he was back in 16, 17, 18, and I don't think even the most loyal diehard Cowboys fans do. And I think there is a little bit of misconception about Zeke entering this year. I think some people think he is far and away the worst running back in football, and I don't think that's the case either. Now, I don't think if you ranked every running back 1 through 32 that Zeke would be 7 or 9. I think he would be around 26 or 27, but I don't think he is as bad as some people want to make him out to be, and his receiving numbers last year, believe it or not, were very comparable to Lions' second-year player Jahmyr Gibbs. So, he's not going to be a superstar, but I think he will be somewhat serviceable. And if I had to project a stat line for Zeke, if they give him around 220 carries, I think it'd be around 850 to 900 yards and around 7 to 10 touchdowns, which, again, isn't bad. Now, CeeDee Lamb is a player, and full transparency, I am recording this a couple days in advance. I think they're going to work that long-term deal out, and if they do, there will be a text blurb at the bottom of the screen between now and the video release. But CeeDee is, without a doubt, one of the best receivers in football, and if he plays all 17 games, I would be surprised if he's not around 14 or 1,500 yards this year, and that should be expected for the next several years. I mean, CeeDee is only 25 years old. He is, without a doubt, one of the best receivers on the planet, and he is worth the money that he is going to soon be paid. Jake Ferguson quietly finished top 8 amongst tight ends in receiving yards last year, and I fully expect that to happen again. And to be completely honest, my biggest concerns or question marks entering the year for the Cowboys are at the running back position, which we already discussed, and the wide receiver position outside of CeeDee Lamb, and also really with left tackle and center, which we'll break down in a minute. But Jake Ferguson is a really good player, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he finishes with over 1,000 yards this year, because somebody outside of CeeDee Lamb is going to have to step up. And we saw Jake do that last year, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he finishes with 70 catches for 1,000 yards and right around 7 to 9 touchdowns. And if you are playing fantasy football right now, you're about to draft, I think Jake Ferguson is a tremendous option because that offense is going to pass the football a lot, and I think he's going to be a direct beneficiary. Now, Brandon Cooks, I have a lot of concerns with him at this point in his career, and I don't think he's a viable wide receiver too. And Jalen Tolbert, I just don't know if he has it to be a legit wide receiver 3 in the NFL and a guy that can catch or routinely catch 60, 65 passes a year. So outside of CeeDee Lamb and really Jake Ferguson, the pass catchers on this offense to me are a little suspect. Now, at the left tackle position right now, Chuma Edoga is the starting left tackle, and we often talk about putting your rookie quarterback in a position to succeed, but for Tyler Guyton's sake, I kind of hope he doesn't start week 1 against Myles Garrett, and the possibility of Myles getting in his head from day one and ruining his confidence is a lot higher than people would probably like to think. Now, Myles did welcome Ikem Ekwonu to the NFL a couple years ago, back when he was the Panthers' number 6 overall pick, much less a player selected in the mid-20s like Tyler Guyton was, and Myles welcomed Ekwonu to the NFL to the tune of 2 sacks. Now, I do think that Tyler Guyton will eventually be a good player. I would just prefer he doesn't start week 1 against the Browns, and I don't think that would be a recipe for success for him personally. But overall, I think this offense is going to finish top 10 to 12, at worst 12 that is, in offensive points per game. I think they're going to be a really, really solid unit again. And Dak Prescott, per usual, not going to be an issue in the regular season. He's probably going to throw for at least 4,500 yards, probably 32 or 33 touchdowns, maybe even more. And I think his name will, without a doubt, especially with the talent on this offense outside of CeeDee and Jake Ferguson at times, I think Dak's going to, without a doubt, be in the MVP conversation. Naturally, when you are selecting in the mid to late part of the first round, which Dallas usually is, as again, they are the only team in each of the past 3 years to win at least 12 games, you're not going to have the Caleb Williams, CJ Strouds, Bryce Youngs, or any blue chip elite prospects, Will Andersons, guys like that fall into your laps. But with the resources Dallas had entering the 2024 draft, I really liked what they did. Now, my whole thing with Tyler Guyton is I think he will be a good player in the long run. I just don't want to set him out there to Myles Garrett, 70 snaps on an island in his NFL debut and say, all right, buddy, good luck. I think that would really be setting him up for failure, and I think that can ultimately affect a guy's confidence, especially for, the next 2 or 3 games, and I don't think that is putting your players in a position to succeed when you can prevent it, and Dallas can, because Chuma Edoga right now is the starting left tackle. Now, Marshawn Kneeland was a prospect I was not the biggest fan of throughout the 2024 draft process, but I really, really liked the landing spot. And if you are a one-trick pony as a pass rusher, which I personally think Marshawn Kneeland is, you can last in the NFL for 8 to 10 years if you are a Robin, which he most certainly will be to Micah Parsons' Batman. And again, Marshawn Kneeland was not supposed to play all that much in his rookie year because the idea was that Sam Williams would be above him on the depth chart and that they could have 3 pass rushers out there every third and long with Micah, D-Law, and of course, Sam Williams. So in that sense, Kneeland is going to have a bigger role than he thought probably 2 or 3 months ago. And from a stat projection standpoint, I think Marshawn will be around 20, 25 pressures, maybe 3 or 4 sacks. Sacks are always tricky to project because in theory, Micah could, force a quarterback right out of the pocket, right into Marshawn's lap, and if there's 6 of those, then it's going to look like Marshawn had a tremendous rookie season, even though Micah was, in theory, doing all the dirty work. Now, for some of their other draft prospects that they had, I really love Cooper Beebe, and I thought Cooper was a player all throughout the process that was underrated and underappreciated, and I think Cooper will be a guy that stays in the NFL for 6, 7, 8, 10 years, really as long as he wants to play, and I think his floor as a player is incredibly high, and I think he will start some games for them at some point. Maurice Luafau is an interesting linebacking prospect. They took him in the top 100, but with nickel being the new base, I wouldn't expect too much from Maurice in his rookie year. I would love if he had a good rookie year and to have him and Micah out there, and even have Marquise Bell out there as well, but again, we're talking about a late 3rd round pick, so I wouldn't expect all that much. But one other prospect that I liked that the Cowboys took, really, really good depth piece, was Wake Forest corner Kalen Carson. It was a little shocking to me that Kalen fell in the draft as far as he did, and when Dallas picked him up that late in the 5th round, I couldn't help but love the selection. I mean, when you were getting that type of value that late in the draft, I'm all for it every single time. So despite Dallas not having the Caleb Williams, the Rome Odunze, or the Marvin Harrison Jr., and the Max Melton, and the Darius Robinsons of the world, I thought they had a really good draft, all things considered. And I think they will walk out of this draft when it's all said and done with at least 2 long-term starters. And when you're selecting that far and that late in the 1st round, that's really all you can ask for. The Cowboys' 2024 schedule is going to be tough, and that's what happens when you win your division and you have a number 1 schedule, and credit where it's due, Dallas has won 12 games in each of the last 3 years. Now, just being honest, I don't think they're going to win 12 games this year. They have a very, very difficult schedule, and in particular, there's a 4-game stretch coming off of their Week 7 bye, where they play at San Francisco, at Atlanta, then play home against the Eagles and Texans, and even before the Week 7 bye, they played Detroit, which is an incredibly tough 5-game stretch. And I don't think Dallas is going to win 12 games again this year, but I think they have a pretty high floor. And I think they're going to win at least 9 or 10 games, and ultimately I think we're going to have this team playing in the wild card round of the playoffs. Now, I don't think it's a matter of if this team is going to be the number 1 seed, because ultimately I don't think they're going to be, which at the end of the day, if you're 2, 7, 3, 4, it doesn't matter what seed you are as if you're not the number 1. And I don't think the Cowboys are going to be the number 1 seed this year. Now, for anyone who was wondering about where we stand on Dak Prescott and the postseason and all of that, here's my prediction or ceiling for the 2024 Cowboys. To me, it doesn't matter what they do in the regular season, because I think they're going to somehow, some way get to the postseason. Whether they're a 5 seed, if they become the first team to repeat as NFC East champions for the first time in 20 years, it doesn't matter. This is really the only team that I'm saying this about. I really don't care what they do in the regular season because I think this is going to be a team that gets to the playoffs. And I'm a little out on Dak after last year. I don't say that about many players, but for Dak specifically, I'm going to have to see it to believe it to really buy back in. And there were times last year where I was bought in, and I thought with the combination of Dak playing at an MVP level or close to an MVP level, and then with that defense being as good as it was, only to come crashing down in a real time span of about an hour and 15 minutes before the Packers were up 27-0. For me, it's going to be, you have to prove it. And ultimately, I think this team's ceiling is a divisional round loss. I don't think they're going to get to the NFC Championship game this year, and I don't know anybody that legitimately thinks they will. I mean, they have a lot of flaws on the offense, and when you're not going to be able to run the ball consistently the way I don't think Dallas is going to be able to, and you have a quarterback that struggles at times during the postseason, to put it mildly, to me, it has divisional round exit written all over it, but I don't think it's going to be the Cowboys' year this year. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 36% of people watching are subscribed, and helps the channel tremendously. If you like this, you will love the Football Analysis Podcast. The link is in the description, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.